Power creep is usually a term used to describe the process in multiplayer games in which new content added over time sort of supersedes old content in terms of usefulness. With the advent of new heroes, champions, mechanics, Pokemon, or whatever, legacy content can often be pretty much useless without careful balancing on the part of developers. I mean, it doesn't take that much observation to tell how much of competitive Pokemon is dominated by newer additions to their roster. And that's because Game Freak tends to be pretty light on the tuning of old mons whose names aren't Charizard. Although power creep is pretty much only used as a term to describe a phenomenon present in competitive gaming, I think it's a fun way to colloquially describe the way all sorts of media and pop culture progress, particularly television. As new seasons come and go, there's often a pressure to sort of raise the stakes regarding the plots, visuals, and especially antagonists of storylines. After all, bigger is better, right? Well, sure, and a lot of the time we see this work out initially, but often after the stakes have been taken to their logical conclusion, it can be difficult to keep momentum, often leading to showrunners trying to replicate the initial magic over and over, or just changing their direction very abruptly. It's not easy, and more likely than not, there's always going to be a give and take on how to maintain scope of whatever project you're working on, whether it be balancing multiplayer games or writing shonen. Wow, it's almost like creative work isn't actually an endless series of objectively right and wrong decisions, and it's actually a job that requires compromising and taking risks. Who would have thought? Anyway, I wanted to talk today about how this phenomenon can be seen in total drama, particularly with the progression of the villains. I found myself diving into this rabbit hole while writing the Total Drama All-Stars video, but given that video is looking to be longer than my 3.5-hour video on World Tour, good lord, why do I do this to myself? I think that this is an interesting enough topic to warrant its own video. Also, it's nice to make videos that don't take 6 months now and then, for whatever that's worth. Also, spoiler warning for the entire show, including the reboot. I'm gonna be talking about all of it, so, keep that in mind. Any talk about upping the ante regarding Total Drama pretty much has to start with Season 3, Total Drama World Tour. There's no way around it. I mean, I like action, but I think it really didn't do much to increase its scope compared to Island, at least not in terms of its core storytelling. I mean, sure, there are some more out there challenges and some experimentation with the show's format, but regarding the show's drama, it's not going above and beyond Island. In fact, it's arguably lower. A common criticism of action is the lack of nail-biting drama between characters, and the fact that, frankly, the nail-biting drama we do get kind of sucks. And although I am a proud total drama action defender, I certainly see it. This season sort of has antagonist figures, but none of them compete with Heather. I don't even think it was even on anyone's mind to have someone competing with Heather. To be totally transparent, this is just my speculation, but I think the lack of a full-on bad guy in action is part of why they went so above and beyond in World Tour. I mean, going from sort of comedy-focused, meanish, manipulative-ish characters to Alejandro is a stark change in direction, and I can't help but believe there was an intentional move to do so after fan criticism of action. That's speculation though. Don't go telling people that as a fact. I'll never forget watching World Tour for the first time and just thinking, oh, Alejandro is literally just Justin. I mean, it's not even subtle. Both characters are initially introduced as having the ability to charm almost anyone, particularly members of the opposite sex, but not exclusively.
Wowie! I like girls!
Time to pay back that favor. They also have the ability to charm animals, because total drama animals seem to operate under a similar kind of attraction to humans, I guess. Alejandro and Justin both seem to be visually stunning to the characters of the total drama world, but while that seems to be Justin's only defining trait, Alejandro has more tricks up his sleeve. Despite Justin's good looks, he wasn't ever seen as an adept sweet talker. I mean, sure, he was able to get girls to do a lot of things for him in the TDI special, but that seemed to be more because his good looks have a straight-up hypnotizing power. Alejandro doesn't seem to have this, but he is very good at sweet talking. He's also a genius who speaks several languages, and a gifted skateboarder, and a trained hypnotist, and also apparently capable of solving engineer problems that would take trained professionals hours and seconds. Alejandro is the perfect example of what I would call a good-at-everything villain. Some people might call him a Mary Sue, but that term is poisoned by years of culture war internet arguments that I'd rather not find myself in a debate regarding what it actually means. So, good-at-everything villain. From the start, the show does not mince words about how much more skilled, talented, and serious about the competition he is than literally every other contestant.
Losing Sierra to Heather? Tragic, but I still have the upper hand. The president of Cody's fan club doesn't know a thing about me. No one does. And I intend to keep it that way, because compared to me, Heather's a saint.
Oh, finally, a real competitor!
So much of the time with the first few episodes of World Tour focus on making it clear to the audience that Alejandro is the most fearsome competitor the show has ever had, with the exception of maybe Heather. But Heather has obvious weaknesses. She's not much of a charmer, she's not much of an athlete, and she's certainly not a kindred spirit with animals. Like basically every character in the first generation except for Alejandro, she's not inhumanly exceptional. Well, okay, there are also characters that debatably fit into the unrealistically good at everything trait, but it was always for the sake of comedy and not used as a storytelling device. And Alejandro is nothing if not a storytelling device. Now, to some of you, the idea of a character like Alejandro may seem boring. I mean, conflict drives storytelling, and a character who is immune to conflict seems, not particularly good for a satisfying story. And you have a point. To that, I have two important caveats. One, Alejandro technically isn't perfect. His Achilles heel, or heels in this case, are his inferiority complex regarding his family, his picky eating and refusal to eat gross foods, and most importantly of all, Heather. Heather specifically is the catalyst that leads to his downfall in the finale, with a little help earlier on from Cody reminding him of his brother. The second point is that I think good at everything villains like Alejandro, when used correctly, big point right there that we'll get back to, are great storytelling devices. In fact, we've been doing it for millennia. There's an instinct for the professional cartoon complainer in me to sort of wag my finger at Fresh TV for how unrealistic Alejandro's skill set is, because, let's be real, it's not that realistic. He shows a level of mastery of so many different things that puts him on a high level above every other competitor. And I gotta say, the fact that Alejandro is just cracked plays a big part in why Season 3 has this sense of scale and urgency that frankly has never been matched. As I said, he is on a whole other level when compared to his adversaries, and the way Heather narrowly beats him just in time is classic. It's fantastic. No notes. Well, actually there are notes, but no notes up until the last minute or so. However, with the season over and a new cast on the way, I think the writers of Total Drama had a dilemma on their hands. Because when you have a villainous new character like Alejandro, who ups the ante in every way and seems to be well equipped for every possible situation, save for a 4-course meal of quote-unquote authentic Chinese street cuisine, it's incredibly hard to follow that up without seeming toned down or derivative. Like, do they just make a villain who is clearly not as good as Alejandro? Or do they just make a villain who's perfect at literally everything, including eating gross food? Well, for Revenge of the Island, they chose the former. Scott was not meant to be taken as seriously as Alejandro was, and that's made evident pretty much immediately. One of the first things we do is see him sniff his own armpit. Yeah, just get in there. You've got nothing to prove. You get stuck in traffic and put your pants on one leg at a time like the rest of us. Scott might be Season 4's quote-unquote main villain, but the writers clearly didn't try to replicate Alejandro's grip on the season with him. It's hard to treat a character who's constantly the butt end of so much slapstick as some larger-than-life drama machine, and it's good that no one was trying to. Heck, he didn't even make it to the final 3. It's evident that Scott was meant to be much more of a comedy character, and for the most part, he's good enough. Especially because other less than well-intentioned characters like Joe pick up the slack. I think the only part that I personally dislike is that he's very clearly lying when he's being dishonest to others. I'm not totally sure if it's just his voice actor's performance or the way he's written. I'm leaning towards the latter, but yeah, just not for me. I wish this show had the courage to be a bit more subtle with this kind of stuff. Anyway, Scott doesn't fit into my whole thesis with this video, other than the point I'm making that it's easy to write oneself in a corner when upping the ante of a story, because that is something that happens with Scott and Revenge of the Island in general. It's always felt a lot smaller in scope than World Tour, in large part to not having such an all-encompassing narrative direction, also because it's literally smaller in scope. Frankly, the crazy mutant stuff is compensating for a lot. You know what does fit in with my point though? Mal. Comparing a character as universally panned as Mal to a character as universally beloved as Alejandro will probably get more than a few people mad at me, but I mean, they have a lot in common. Both of them are portrayed as being ruthless, and playing at a level of dirtiness that the show has not seen up until that point, and their personal arcs also fuel the drama and plot for pretty much the entirety of their respective seasons. Most importantly, at least for what I'm talking about today, they are both portrayed as just being good at everything. Everything they need to be good at for whatever situation they're in, at least. They are villains of the season who are portrayed as unstoppable forces. Well, kinda. Alejandro feels like an unstoppable force, and although it seems that Total Drama All-Stars really wants Mal to feel similar, well, they don't stick to landing. I'll put it at that. To Mal's credit, and trust me, I don't give Mal credit often, his premise as a character is at least unique enough that he doesn't immediately feel like a rehash of Alejandro. He has his own origins and he also plays the game differently enough that he feels like his own thing. Is it a good thing? Not particularly, but he doesn't just feel like another Alejandro. I think the key difference between Mal and Alejandro is charisma. Alejandro has it in pretty much every scene save for a few times where we see his mask slip, and Mal? Well, he has a mask too, but there's no charisma whatsoever, and like Scott in the previous season, he always acts really suspiciously and is never adequately challenged for it, at least in my opinion. I can see why the Gen 1 cast might not bat an eye at a lot of Mal's mannerisms, but the fact that Cameron and Zoe keep believing him, despite all the stuff he does to their faces, is just hard to not take issue with. Perhaps one can argue that Alejandro was able to trick certain characters a little too easily, but even if that is true, it's on such a different level. I mean, for one, Alejandro has a silver tongue and takes advantage of people's insecurities. Mal just brute forces it with absurd lies and somehow continues to be taken at face value. There's also something to be said that it seems that this show never wants a character to lie to another character unless that character is using the most obvious "I am lying" inflection ever, except for Alejandro for some reason. It's jarring. The show really wants Mal to be seen as a true villain, but what does he even do really? He breaks people's stuff, for no clear reason. I've heard people make the argument that he broke Sierra's phone, for example, in order to throw her off her game. But that's not even true. It would make some sense if that had been the catalyst for her weird Cody delusions, but those start before he gets to her phone anyway, and she ends up fixing it but then continues to talk later on about how it's broken because frankly, continuity has never been the show's strong point. It's really on the nose how often the show postures about how sinister they want Mal to be. You could argue the visuals like the fiery background is the show being facetious, but one thing I really can't think of a good justification for is Mal being seen by the others as so vicious that even Duncan squirms at the thought of him. That is laughable. I can't think of a single evil thing Mal does that another character hasn't done in the past without the same kind of forced gravitas. But still, he gets to restrain Alejandro and have him immediately pleading on his knees, because Mal has to be the biggest, most evil and threatening character ever. The reason Mal failed and Alejandro succeeded was, well, one villain's demise was a magic reset button inside a person's head and the other was a small but important weakness finally being abused, but also the fact that while Alejandro was consistently portrayed as intelligent and manipulative, Mal was not. The only reason Mal got away with so much was because, well, everyone in Season 5 acts like a total idiot. And frankly, I think these kinds of villains work best when their adversaries are reasonably outsmarted as opposed to just nerfed to oblivion. Like when someone as skinny as Mal somehow is able to physically overpower Alejandro. I know I just complained about that like 4 sentences ago, but seriously, wow. Anyway, that's the short of my point. The long of my point is going to be, well, hopefully out one day. But before I go, I guess it's worth touching on the power scaling of the villains that came after, even if briefly. Sugar was a huge nerf, but we got to see the over-the-topness of Scarlet, who honestly was handled a lot better than Mal. I think if they're going to really try and get kooky with it, a character like Scarlet is the way to go. The Ice Dancers are sort of in the middle between a lot of their past villains. They're skilled competitors but aren't over the top, and they are also pretty funny. The newest seasons of the show have gone back to basics in a lot of ways, and honestly, I'm thankful. Julia is a cool villain with a fun screen presence. I think my biggest complaint with her is the fact that a lot of her best maneuvers are literally just done off screen for no reason. Like, she just stole Damien's statue apparently without the show even telling us, and we're supposed to be fine with that. Still though, more often than not, I like seeing her schemes and interactions with the rest of the cast, and she's not terrible at manipulating people. She's definitely derivative of Heather, but I think honestly, in my opinion, the show willing to be a bit derivative was a good call after frankly 2 seasons that weren't received well, in part because of how out there they were. I wouldn't be against the show trying to up the ante again and expand its horizons. In fact, I hope it does, but given how it seems that 13 episode seasons are here to stay, I think the strategy of keeping things relatively grounded for now is fair enough. Although Alejandro was a great villain, I think there can only ever be one villain like Alejandro. Anyway, that's all for me. I have a lot of editing to do.